There are moments that pass quietly, but change everything. For Burkina Faso, that moment is now. Not because of foreign aid, conferences, or headlines, but because a nation dared to choose itself. Under the steady hand of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a quiet revolution is unfolding, built not on slogans, but on schools, clinics, seeds, and bricks. Gone are the days when daily life felt like a war against poverty. In their place, free education, accessible healthcare, affordable homes, and farmers who feed the nation, not just their families. Stay with us. What you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a shift that may change how we define growth, sovereignty, and success in Africa. Subscribe to Power and Pulse and walk with us into the future unfolding today. This isn't charity. It's design. It isn't theory. It's real. Today, we take you deep inside Burkina Faso's boldest transformation yet, where affordability isn't a privilege, but a primacy. In the heart of West Africa, Burkina Faso is rewriting its future. One harvest, one school, one clinic at a time. This is not the story of a nation asking the world for help. It is the story of a government daring to rewire its economy from the ground up. Since Captain Ibrahim Traoré took leadership in 2022, a series of rapid, targeted reforms have reshaped what it means to live, learn, and grow in Burkina Faso. His guiding principle was simple yet radical. True sovereignty must begin with economic dignity. From the earliest days of his administration, four strategic pillars emerged: agricultural empowerment, free education, universal health access, and affordable housing. Each policy area wasn't designed in isolation. They were interlinked, forming a system where one reform reinforces the others. The result? A coordinated collapse of the cost of living and a nationwide surge in human potential. We begin with the soil, the foundation. In Burkina Faso, farming is not only labor, it is legacy. For decades, farmers were trapped in a cycle of dependency: unreliable rainfall, overpriced imported goods, and foreign-controlled pricing left families struggling just to feed themselves. Traoré's government broke that cycle. A sweeping land redistribution program returned idle and foreign-owned fields to local farmers, both subsistence and commercial. The state then supplied high-quality seeds, organic fertilizers, hand tools, and plowing machinery. Most importantly, these resources were delivered free, not sold or loaned. Massive irrigation projects brought dry seasons to life. Farmers were trained in new techniques, and irrigation cooperatives helped distribute water across plots with shared solar-powered pumps. Where water once stopped the growing season, now technology and training sustain it. But raw harvests are not enough. The next leap came through village-level agro-processing hubs, mills, oil presses, grain silos, transforming raw crops into value-added products. These hubs acted like local time machines, compressing effort, adding value, and expanding shelf life. In less than 18 months, food inflation dropped from over 15% to 5%. Sorghum, millet, beans, rice, all now more abundant and more affordable in local markets. Take maize flour. Once sold at 600 CFA per kilogram, it now stabilizes around 450, 500 CFA. Vegetable prices, once volatile, have steadied. Eggs and poultry are now consistent and available even in peri-urban communities. In the capital, Ouagadougou, a family can now buy a balanced meal for 500 CFA, not 1,000. Women's cooperatives are feeding not only markets but also schools and hospitals, ensuring nutrition flows into the next generation. Education was the next front. Previously, families were forced to choose, feed their children, or send them to school. Traoré made that choice obsolete. All primary and secondary education is now entirely free. No tuition, no voluntary contributions, no hidden fees. For the most vulnerable families, the government also provides uniforms and school supplies. A rapidly expanding school meal program ensures students are not learning on empty stomachs. Since the reforms began, school attendance has surged by 30%, and female literacy is up by 12%. Girls who once dropped out after primary school now stay and succeed. The ripple effects continue into healthcare. Once a financial cliff, a medical visit today no longer threatens family savings. The government eliminated fees at all primary care clinics and heavily subsidized district hospitals. Basic medications, prenatal care, vaccinations, all are now publicly funded. A nationwide ambulance service ensures even remote villages receive emergency transport. Mobile medical units, meanwhile, roam the countryside offering treatment, education, and outreach, and then shelter. In 2024, the government launched the Home for All initiative, building over 10,000 affordable housing units using local materials. Mortgages are structured with dignity, low interest, spread over 15 to 20 years. A family that once paid 200,000 CFA per month in rent can now own a home with monthly payments as low as 40,000 CFA. These are not mere houses. They are the new roots of national stability. All of this forms a new social contract, a Burkina Faso economic transformation not built on foreign prescriptions, but on local priorities. The nation is not merely surviving, it is designing its future. But if farms have become engines and schools are full, what happens when the people begin to speak? Cliffhanger. From the fields and classrooms, a new voice begins to rise, one that demands to be heard. In dusty courtyards and bustling markets, a quiet astonishment is taking root. Not long ago, most families in Burkina Faso measured their months by sacrifice. Which child would go to school, which medicine to skip, which meal to stretch. But now, for the first time in a generation, those choices are no longer impossible. They are unnecessary. The transformation has reached the homes and hearts of ordinary people, and their stories form the soul of this revolution. In the village of Dori, a mother named Mariam stands beside her millet field. A few seasons ago, it was scorched and uncertain. Today, it is green and brimming with promise. Thanks to redistributed land and a free irrigation pump provided by the local cooperative, her yields have doubled. She sells part of her harvest at a local market and keeps the rest to feed her family. With the surplus, she installed a solar panel to power lights at night. Her children now study after sunset. This year, she says, they will go to the new school, without fees, without shame. In Wahiguya, a city once known for crowded slums and overpriced rentals, a young couple recently moved into one of the government's new subsidized homes. They used to pay 50,000 CFA per month for a leaking room. Now for 45,000 CFA, they own a clean, solar-powered flat with running water and space for a small vegetable garden. Their daughter is enrolled in the free local school. Their newborn receives monthly checkups at the community clinic. These aren't isolated cases. They are evidence of a deeper shift. Across the country, parents no longer dread September or June, the traditional seasons of school fees and exam costs. Before, my son missed class because we couldn't pay, says Awa, a mother in Ouagadougou. Now he learns and heals in the same week. Her pride is quiet but immense. Teachers, too, feel the change. Classrooms are full. Children are fed and focused. A principal in Bobo Dioulasso explains, attendance is up, especially among girls. And when children eat at school, they don't just stay, they thrive. At clinics, doctors report an influx of patients, not because illness is rising, but because barriers are falling. When care is free, people come early, not late. They come for checkups, not just emergencies. Health workers are no longer overwhelmed by grief, but energized by prevention. Markets reflect the mood. Women selling eggs, cassava, and beans now operate with confidence. Prices are stable. Demand is real. Before we feared food, one vendor shares. Now we plan for profit. Even the language of aspiration has changed. Children no longer say, if I can go to school. They say, when I finish school. That small grammatical shift carries the weight of a generation reclaiming its future. Burkina Faso's transformation has ignited something intangible but unmistakable. Hope that stands on evidence. But not all is quiet. At mosques and town halls, citizens are beginning to ask more. If food can be stable, why not fuel? If schools are free, why not universities? If we can build homes, why not industries? The reforms have unlocked expectation, and expectation, once awakened, does not rest. Civil society is energized. Youth movements once focused on protest, now gathered to propose policies. Farmers' unions push for more storage infrastructure. Women's cooperatives lobby for inclusion in national budgeting. Far from quelling civic engagement, the reforms have ignited it. The media landscape, too, is evolving. National radio stations dedicate airtime to citizen updates on local projects. Online platforms track progress, funding, and outcomes. Where once news was about struggle, it now includes success. Captain Traoré's government did not just lower the cost of living, it raised the cost of complacency. It reminded citizens what is possible, and in doing so, invited them to demand more. Still, a question hangs in the air like Harmattan dust. Can such momentum survive politics? Will the institutions built today last tomorrow? Cliffhanger. And as the people rise, the politics must follow or fracture. What happens next could shape not just a country but a continent. When public policy shifts from paper to pavement, from pledges to people's lives, the ripple effects stretch far beyond spreadsheets. In Burkina Faso, the reforms initiated under Captain Traoré have already changed how families eat, learn, and heal. But now a second transformation is underway, this time in the very fabric of the state. First, the politics of participation. When citizens no longer feel abandoned by the system, they begin to engage with it. In villages where irrigation projects have bloomed, communities are forming oversight committees to ensure water access remains fair. In cities where housing cooperatives have taken root, young professionals are gathering not only to discuss mortgages, but to co-design urban services. The old image of the silent citizen is fading. In its place, a Burkina-based civic awakening. Second, the economics of stability. Inflation has dropped. Household spending on food, health, and education has fallen dramatically. Disposable income is being redirected into businesses, bicycles, even books. A family that once feared unexpected hospital visits now saves for planting season. This shift, though rarely dramatic on paper, is seismic in reality. It turns survival into strategy. More importantly, Burkina Faso has started reversing its dependency on imports. In 2023, the country slashed rice imports by 50%, thanks to domestic production. Cooking oil mills and cotton ginneries now operate in multiple provinces, converting raw crops into processed goods. This is import substitution done right, not through blind tariffs but through local capacity. And with stability comes security. In regions once plagued by recruitment into armed groups, often driven by poverty or displacement, the tone is changing. Access to land, income, and education is undercutting the root causes of extremism. Though challenges remain, community leaders report fewer youth turning to violence and more returning to school or farming. On the national stage, Burkina Faso's budget priorities are shifting too. The share of spending on health and education has risen. Military spending, though still significant due to regional instability, is increasingly matched by human capital investment. Ministers speak openly of a new model, one not defined by GDP growth alone, but by quality of life metrics. This reorientation is already catching attention across West Africa. Civil society groups in Niger, Togo, and Guinea are referencing the Burkina model in their campaigns. University students debate its merits. Local radio hosts call it a second independence. The change isn't just felt in Ouagadougou. It's being watched from Bamako to Banjul. Yet not all reactions are celebratory. Established elites, those who once benefited from rent-seeking, import monopolies, or inflated land prices, are feeling the pressure. Some push back through lawsuits, media campaigns, or quiet obstruction in administrative offices. Others have adapted, rebranding themselves as champions of reform. The political landscape is in flux and alliances are shifting. But perhaps the most radical change is philosophical. In a region where development often meant donor agendas and international blueprints, Burkina Faso is asserting its right to self-designed progress. It is saying, we do not reject the world, but we will lead our way through it. That posture, the merging of pride with practicality, has begun to inspire a broader movement. One where the phrase Burkina Faso economic transformation is no longer just a description, but a declaration. It suggests that economic justice is not a luxury. It is the baseline. That affordability is not a policy option. It is a sovereign imperative. Still, every transformation invites a reckoning. Can the momentum continue without slipping into populism or unsustainable spending? Can decentralization succeed without chaos? Can state-led development remain efficient as it scales? These are not questions to fear. They are questions to ask, boldly, publicly, and without apology. So we ask you, watching from afar, if a nation once dismissed as landlocked and impoverished can do this, what's stopping others? Cliffhanger. And as the spotlight widens, so too does the scrutiny. the world is beginning to watch. The changes in Burkina Faso have not gone unnoticed beyond its borders. Though not always on the front page, a quiet current of international attention is gathering, from regional blocs, donor nations, media circles, and civil society across the continent. In West Africa, the reaction has been mixed but increasingly curious. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, once quick to criticize political transitions outside electoral norms, has remained cautious. While formal condemnations mark the early days of Traoré's government, recent communiques have softened in tone. Quiet diplomatic observers admit that the results, not the rhetoric, are driving a reassessment. Stability, affordability, and rising indicators of human welfare are difficult to ignore. The African Union, AU, too, is beginning to shift the lens. Panels on youth employment, sustainable agriculture, and education reform have all cited Burkina Faso's integrated approach as a promising model. Delegations from Rwanda, Ethiopia, and Senegal have made study visits, particularly to observe the local agro-processing networks and school feeding schemes. Outside the continent, however, the picture is more complex. Traditional donor nations, particularly in Europe and North America, are watching with a mix of skepticism and quiet admiration. There are questions. How is this being funded? Is the model sustainable? What are the human rights trade-offs? Yet there is also a growing recognition that development cannot be imposed. It must be claimed. In the United Kingdom, public discourse has begun to pick up the thread. Academic journals and foreign policy forums have started to analyze free education in Africa, using Burkina Faso as a surprising success case. Articles in platforms like Chatham House and the Guardian Africa edition describe the country's reforms as pragmatic radicalism, a term that captures both the ambition and grounded execution of the project. Meanwhile, media platforms within the African diaspora are amplifying the story with pride. Pan-African podcasts, youth channels on YouTube, and Black British think tanks are turning Burkina Faso's example into a point of community debate. The message is resonating. If one country can reimagine affordability, why not more? Even the IMF and World Bank, long critical of subsidy-heavy models, are beginning to shift tone. In closed-door policy briefings, analysts acknowledge that debt-free, domestic resource-based development may offer more resilience than previously thought. The old dichotomy, market or state, is giving way to a new hybrid, sovereignty aligned with social outcomes. Still, global attention is a double-edged sword. With every headline comes pressure, with every case study expectation, and with every success, the quiet hope that this will not be the exception, but the start of something bigger. Cliffhanger. But hope alone won't build the future. What comes next will test every pillar laid so far. As Burkina Faso enters its third year of accelerated reform, the road ahead is both promising and perilous. For every subsidy that succeeds, there is a spreadsheet to balance. For every new school or clinic, there is a question of maintenance, training, and scale. Transformation is not a moment. It is a movement. And every movement must learn how to endure. The risks are real. Climate change threatens the agricultural backbone that supports the country's affordability gains. Unpredictable rainfall and rising temperatures could strain irrigation systems, crop yields, and food security. Continued investment in resilient farming techniques, drought-resistant seeds, and reforestation is essential, not just for farmers, but for national stability. Fiscal pressure is another test. So far, Burkina Faso has funded its reforms through domestic resource mobilization, cost-cutting in bureaucracy, and redirecting military contracts toward public service. But as the scale grows, so too does the need for broader tax bases and transparent financial management. The model must remain lean, not lavish, a system of dignity, not dependency. There are also political questions. Will future governments honor these programs? Will decentralization stay accountable? Can the civil service match the ambition of policy? The answers lie in institution building, not just in leadership. And yet within these challenges lies a profound opportunity. If Burkina Faso can anchor its sovereignty and affordability, it sets a precedent for a new African discourse, one that moves beyond aid or trade into a vision where dignity is the baseline, not the bonus. It will mean showcasing how national wealth, even when limited, can be turned into public confidence. Youth and women will be key. Integrating their voices into policymaking, budgeting, and project oversight will ensure continuity. Already, student unions and rural cooperatives are taking on more responsibility. Scaling this into genuine co-governance is the next frontier. The dream is not to build a perfect system, but a resilient one that can bend without breaking, adjust without abandoning its values. Across the continent, people are watching. In classrooms from Kampala to Kigali, in radio stations from Accra to Johannesburg, the Burkina story is being told. Not as miracle, but as method. Not as charity, but as challenge. Because if this small, landlocked country can feed itself, heal its own, and house its future, what excuse does the rest of the world have? Cliffhanger. And so we arrive at the threshold, not of triumph, but of choice. Will this path be walked alone, or will others follow? In a world where poverty is often portrayed as destiny, Burkina Faso has rewritten the script. It has shown that sovereignty is not just about borders, but about budgets, bread, and belonging. Through land, learning, clinics, and concrete, a new foundation is being laid, not for perfection but for possibility. Once this nation was seen only through the lens of struggle. Its name appeared in footnotes, in warning signs, in forecasts of fragility. But today, Burkina Faso economic transformation is no longer a future tense. It is unfolding, measurable, and real. There was a time when food prices crushed families, when school fees broke dreams, when health costs shattered savings. That era is ending. In its place rises a generation of children who go to school full and free. A mother who no longer chooses between medicine and meals. A father who builds a home not from hope alone, but from policy made personal. The world has often overlooked free education in Africa, treating it as charity or burden. But in Burkina Faso, it is a cornerstone of development. A national promise that learning is not a luxury, but a right. The emotion is layered. Fan no at the decades stolen by inequality. Tiek Noi for the years wasted on dependency. But above all, there is Hai Vong, because the tide is turning. And yes to how. Not just for what has been built, but for who has built it. And so we ask, if Burkina Faso can rise, who else might stand beside it? What happens when nations stop waiting and start building? If this journey moved you, stay, subscribe, share the story, because transformation deserves more than silence. It deserves a voice. This is more than a case study. It is a signal. A declaration that Burkina Faso economic transformation is not a miracle. It is a model, one that belongs to Africa and to the world.